Well, it's almost 5 o'clock somewhere, namely here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's Geica's Got Game special Thursday afternoon/evening edition. I am Matt Geica. The brothers Geica are, in fact, reunited as Mark joins me alongside. And as we said, Mark, it is 5 o'clock, so, well, nearly happy hour. Let's crack open our Oscar Blues cans. You know someone. We're friends with someone who works for them, so we're going to bring it, well, at least within the family, so to speak. And, well, there's some distributors around the area, as we have found out. Let's kick one back.
Local ties?
Yeah, let's tip one back, rather. Kick back and talk some sports. How about that?
All. This is how we normally would do it anyway, so why not bring it full circle?
Let's make it authentic, and thank you to Liveberg for the koozie. Very attractive. Facebook.com Liveberg Studio. That's where you can find that. You can find us on Facebook right now, also on riversedgepgh.com/live. If you're listening to the audio stream, we're on the normal time, and you're wondering, what are we talking about Thursday afternoon? Maybe you wish it were still Thursday afternoon because you might be at work at this moment. If not, well, I hope you're enjoying your Friday if you are and experiencing this after the fact. Kind of a time warp scenario here, but Mark will try to keep it as normal as possible. With the two of us, we typically don't have any problems killing off an hour. But we have some topics. Don't worry, we're not just going to ramble on you. Sometimes we can go that way too, but we do want to talk about the Pirates. You and I went to the game on Tuesday night against the Cubs after the big trade deadline acquisition of Chris Archer. Felt like a franchise revived. I don't think that's hyperbole at all. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Also, with your experience in the field of medicine, in athletic training, in physical therapy, we always like to bring in that side of sports into the shows when you're in studio. So we'll talk about performance-enhancing drugs and whether maybe they should all be legalized. Would that level the playing field more than what we're trying to do right now, which I think we all can admit is a pretty flawed system. Also, do personal brands in sports trump team brands these days? It seems like, at least with some of the top-of-the-line athletes, it doesn't even matter who they play for. It's more about the name on the back of the jersey than the name on the front, so a little different from what we've always heard in sports. So, well, hey, thanks for coming in, first of all. Mark Azzini's going to get married in, well, if you're listening, in 7 days' time. If you're watching right now on Thursday afternoon, it's 8 days' time. It's getting close. Need a few more beers before you can take the plunge.
We need the whole case to bring it in.
Well, we did buy a 12-pack, so it's always possible.
Running out a commercial break.
He's just kidding, Caitlin. Caitlin's his fiancée. She's a native of Cranberry, so we're hoping you guys can make it back to Pittsburgh full time. As for right now, you're in Philadelphia, so it wasn't that bad of a drive getting over here and moving in with us in Westview for the next week or so.
Got some neat roommates.
Yeah, right. You have one young one loud one in particular, named Lucas.
Kind of a nuisance at times. Huh?
Yeah, he can keep you up at night. He can get you up early in the morning, and when you're trying to take a nap, he has a way of making noise too.
Luckily, I sleep really hard.
Yes.
Even so, I wouldn't hold it against him.
Fortunately, you do. And fortunately for you, where we live, really easy to get downtown to Pittsburgh, easy to get to Millvale, obviously, just a 10-minute drive over the hill. But if you want to go to PNC Park for a Pirates game like we did on Tuesday night, well, it's rather convenient. Took advantage of your future brother-in-law's corporate tickets, maybe the best seats I've had.
Thanks, Michael.
Ever. Yeah, thanks, Mike, for that. We were, I don't want to say right behind home plate, we were just above the Lexus Club seats, though, so a fine place to be for what felt like the first game of a brand new life for the 2018 Pirates, or maybe the Pirates franchise in general, because, in case you don't know by now, and you probably do, but they acquired Chris Archer from the Tampa Bay Rays. They were in on him 2 years ago, and it seemed like a pipe dream. This time they got it done by trading Austin Meadows and also Tyler Glasnow. Two post-type prospects, but two young players with value. But the Pirates moving young players to get an established veteran player, we've basically never seen that at the trade deadline. So for me, that felt new. But I'm in the sports industry. Maybe I can get lost in the forest for the trees. How did you see it coming from the outside, just from the fan perspective?
I just felt like that was big. I mean, when was the last time the Pirates did anything like this that was even relevant with as far as a move, even in off season or, I mean, definitely at the deadline? Geez, it's been a long time that it seemed like they even really cared. And, I mean, that was the big thing with the off season, too, with the fans. I mean, everybody was, very upset about some of the moves that was made and
the bandwagon
loss
was
of
empty.
touch. And I mean, So this kind of feels like they are showing that they care still, which is obviously really great and will definitely fill the seats. Because if you get a franchise that at least is trying and looking like they're going to care, I mean, people are going to want to come around and see it.
Normally, I'm Mr. Analytics. I say, okay, what are the positives? What are the negatives? Is this a good trade for the Pirates or is it not? In that way, it's hard to tell because Chris Archer's been a little bit worse the last 2 years than he was in 2013 and 2014 and 2015 when he was looking like an ace. Maybe now he's a 2 or a 3 starter for a good team, but hey, that's still pretty good, number one. He's been durable, and they have him for 3 more years after this year. So all those things are huge for me. But then there's the intangible aspect, and you touched upon it there. Fans had lost faith that the Pirates were even trying to win.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, they lost faith in this team, and I think you're missing the point if you really dig into it and say, well, where's Chris Archer on his career arc, and is he going to get better? Can they make him better? Is Tyler Glass now going to turn out? Is Austin Meadows going to be an all-star? I don't even think that matters.
Because, or why should it matter? Why should you even be considering that?
Because if no one cares about the Pirates, then it's not going to matter. If no one shows up, then there's no significance to the franchise. And even though TV ratings have held pretty steady, and I talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago, showing that people still do care about the Pirates, but you need people in the ballpark, you need attendance, you need to generate revenue if you're going to at least sustain some level of payroll at the major league level. And also, there's that intangible thing, like I said, the buzz, the interest, the excitement surrounding the team. I think for the most part, it's back. It feels like a team that's revived, back from the dead. And what a surprise to see Neil Huntington pull this off.
Yeah, that looked good the other night. I mean, fans were really getting involved, especially when it came down to a really close 8th and 9th. And, I mean, that felt great to be a part of that, especially the 9th inning, trying to get the last 3 outs. It was pretty big because the Cubs got 2 big hits, and then obviously the call at third with Freese, signaling over to the bench for the video. And, I mean, when that call was made, I mean, that place erupted. And it wasn't really that many people, honestly, there for the reaction that seemed like it got, especially having a fair amount of Cubs fans there.
A lot of Cubs fans.
Yeah, I mean, that was great.
Well, that actually may be added to the atmosphere with the 2 rival factions
certainly
cheering back and forth. We've seen that with Penguins and Blue Jackets out in Columbus. You've been a part of those crowds out there that were 50-50.
Dominated.
At some point. Now the Jackets have a better fan base because they've had better teams lately.
Well, sure.
But that's what that reminded me of the other night. But neither here nor there. The Pirates fans that were there just seem more engaged. It's impossible to measure it, maybe by decibel level, but that's about it. But my feel being down in the seats, I was really glad I was in the seats and not in the press box for a game like that because you could feel that people were feeling like the Pirates had made a move. They were players. They're back in the game, baby. Right. And that's exactly how they should feel, I think, even though they're just a half game ahead of the Cardinals for 3rd place in the NL Central, even though there's still a couple of teams separating them from the wild card leaders in the National League. Number one, they're in it. They won 11 in a row. They've won, I believe, 15 of their last 21 or something like that.
Hottest team in July or something, didn't we hear?
Yeah, best record in baseball in July. And they'll host the Cardinals coming in Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Chris Archer will start. So that should be electric. In 13 through 15, Mark, it felt like the Pirates had finally risen to that level of the Penguins and the Steelers where you didn't have to worry about payroll and all this stuff. It was just about winning and losing. It was really... it was really a different experience for someone like
more of an
like
organic
me or like
fan
us.
Experience, yeah.
Yeah, where you didn't feel like the Pirates were a glorified AAA team or just a team that's, they might be frisky for a little bit, but they're ultimately not going to compete. They're a team that's in there to compete for a division and hopefully for postseason success too. We're getting ahead of ourselves a bit now. Like I said, they're out of a playoff spot at the moment, but it felt big, and for me, that's more important than what they lose and what they gained from a player perspective. We'll find out about that down the line. But it was important to get the fans re-engaged, number one, and number two, to get a good player in for many years. So in that way, Huntington went 2 for 2.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I already know my answer to this, but do you feel like, regardless of how Archer's debut is, does that matter?
Well, it doesn't matter in terms of the debut. Now, in terms of what he does in his first 2 months as a Pirate, yeah, that matters. That'll give you an idea of maybe what.
Well, to you, because you're a little bit more, deeper thinking on this thing. But to the fan base, do you feel like?
Well, it'd be nice if they got the win. Yeah, right. Or if he pitched well, pitched competitively. As long as he doesn't get run off the mound in the 2nd inning, I think it's a win.
Right.
And I don't expect him to get run off the mound. He's been pretty much a league average pitcher this year, 4.31 ERA in the American League. That's about average. Yep. Coming from the American League East to the National League Central, That'll help, especially pitching at PNC Park for half of his games.
One less batter.
Not that the Trop was a hitter-friendly park, but you don't have to go to Yankee Stadium or Fenway Park. Even Toronto's ballpark has been notoriously hitter-friendly. So is Baltimore's. So yeah, in fact, he was probably in the best pitcher's ballpark in that division, and now he'll be in a spot where it plays very fair. So he's not going to get dinged by cheap home runs or anything like that. The excuses are gone. He'll be energized. You know that.
Yep.
Obviously there. But I didn't see this coming. And the Pirates, as Ken Rosenthal wrote on The Athletic, they're always in but not all the way in on these trade negotiations.
Right.
So even when it was reported about 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the day of the trade deadline, that the Pirates were a member of a group of teams that were in on Chris Archer, but the Braves were there, the Brewers were there. The Brewers need pitching, and they're in a better spot than the Pirates right now, so that made a lot of sense. But the Pirates then leapt into the front, apparently, with about an hour to go, and that's when you hear that, that's something new altogether. They typically are one of many teams. They're not the team that's bidding. And you mentioned, when's the last time they did anything like this? Forget the deadline. A.J. Burnett, probably. They made that trade in the offseason, but Burnett was on his way down, it looked like. That was almost like a buy low thing. And he revived his career, to his credit, but it wasn't like he had as much value as Archer does now.
Sure. And then we talked about Morneau, too, that acquisition, even though that was after the trading deadline.
Marlon Byrd that same year in 2013.
Yeah, but again, Byrd out of his prime. I mean, this is a guy that potentially has a lot of really good years left.
29 years old, Chris Archer. Yeah, to that point, it's a big deal. And they acquired Jay Happ in 15, and he was outstanding down the stretch. But again, that was we'll pick him up. We think we can fix him. And they did, to their credit. But this is the first time they've actually had to spend real prospects. Austin Meadows, formerly a top 10 prospect in the game. Tyler Glasnow, formerly the top-ranked pitcher in all minor league baseball by many accounts. Now, they've both been devalued a bit. They haven't really dominated at the major league level. Glasnow especially has struggled at spots, and it's looked like, man, is he even going to stick as a pitcher at this level at all? So there are questions there. And like I said, there are questions for Archer. But to get the biggest name at the deadline, that's not a Pirates thing. That's not what the Pirates do.
I feel like we're in a different town.
It's a different dimension. And
where'd I drive to?
I wonder, even though Neil Huntington just signed a contract extension, I believe it was last offseason, for 3 or 4 more years, I wonder if he felt like, well, we're at rock bottom with this fan base. We need, as much as we need a boost for this team this year and into the future, we also need a boost for people to buy in again.
For his job.
Right, and I don't think his job is in jeopardy. I think Clint Hurdle might be out before Neil Huntington just because of the two men's ages. Clint's been doing this for a while. We're getting close to a decade here. He had about a decade in Colorado. So that's a long time to manage in the major leagues, even if you are as successful as he's been for the most part. And Bob Nutting and Frank Coonelly aren't quick pull trigger guys. They're not George Steinbrenner. So it's not like one losing streak's going to cost you your job. In fact, these two guys just got extended after back-to-back losing seasons, Hurdle and Huntington. So I don't know if there was that, but maybe he feels like, okay, this could be my last couple of years as a general manager. Let's see what we can do if I push some chips in. And I know I enjoyed it, both from the analytical perspective, but also from just the Pittsburgh sports fan perspective, appreciating that. And seeing that stadium again, we'll never forget what it was like in the playoffs from a few years back.
Yeah, I haven't been able to be around to see it.
Yeah, I would love to be here for that, too. I covered the 2015 wild card game. That's the one experience I had there.
Right.
But it went away so quickly. And, here's another chance, perhaps, what a story it would be.
Yep.
I don't know. Can you think of another situation like this where a team that was basically operating on a totally different level then all of a sudden just jumped in to the proceedings? I'm thinking other sports, like L.A. Clippers suddenly picked up a couple of guys, Blake Griffin and Chris Paul.
Chris Paul, so they became somewhat relevant.
Right. It's tough to find a comparison here of a downtrodden franchise that suddenly says, okay, now we're dealing. We're wheeling and we're dealing.
Especially with the losing streak that they had prior to some of the success.
With the Pirates,
that's what I mean.
That's why I went to the Clippers, too, because they had the longest losing streak in North American pro sports until the Pirates passed that, of course. It would almost be like, well, you look at the NHL, it would be like a team like the Arizona Coyotes signing John Tavares. And, of course, it went the other way in the NHL this year. The the glamour franchise in Canada, at least in Toronto, picked him up. So
Yep.
this doesn't happen very often, is what I'm saying. And I just wonder what triggered it, and whether it is fear of losing a job, whether it's seeing nobody at PNC Park. I know that had to be scary.
Well, I'm sure their pocketbooks were hurting a little bit.
Oh, I think a lot. And for all the savings that they were able to gain by not spending that much on Major League payroll, I think suddenly they were thinking maybe we've just alienated fans for life. Because how did you feel? You felt, you told me you kind of disconnected from baseball.
I really have, just because it just felt like nobody cared, and that's the big thing. And then that even transcends over not just sports, but in all walks of life. If somebody acts and looks like they care, think how many more people you're going to bring and follow with you when you have that type of support and you're following that. So, and I mean, it just finally this move felt like they probably wanted me back to caring a little bit more. I mean, I still care about Pittsburgh sports and still follow, but maybe a little more passively than actively. Especially, usually baseball, it takes me until about the midway point to even start caring anyway, even if I was all in. It's just a long season for me to really put that much attention.
Tough. It's every day, and it's also overlapping with hockey. And when the Penguins go deep in the playoffs, or even just this year, just the second round, and we follow the Stanley Cup playoffs pretty closely anyway, whether the Penguins are in or they're out, but especially when they're in,
I really do.
That pushes effectively back the start of baseball season. There's opening day, but then really baseball season in Pittsburgh has been starting in the middle of May or beginning of June, since Sidney Crosby and Yevgeny Malkin showed up in town. And then the Steelers start camp. They already started camp, so there's that tiny window that the Pirates have. And to their credit, they won 11 in a row in that tiny window. So they took advantage of that from a player perspective, and now from a front office perspective, they did too.
Yeah, it's pretty huge, isn't it?
So things are looking up, I think.
Hope so.
And like we said, baseball is tough to stay locked in each and every day, but now you have 2 months. I think all of us are looking forward to seeing what this team can do.
It's all about getting hot at the right time, too. Who knows what can happen? Because even some of the years that some other teams won, I mean, even that year with when we ran into Bumgarner, weren't they not too great? And then all of a sudden they caught.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. 2014, they were around 500 midway through.
Yeah.
And then had the best September in baseball and had a really good offense. And then, of course, like we said, Bumgarner shut them down. But I thought that team was poised because of how well they were hitting, especially down the stretch. But it didn't work out. And to be clear, they're not going to get right into the division series. They're 7 behind the Cubs after splitting the series after losing last night, Wednesday night at PNC Park. Despite that feel-good win that we saw on Tuesday, they just treaded water there. It's going to have to be they'll have to win that wild card game, and maybe on the road, maybe at Miller Park, maybe at Coors Field. Who knows? But to even have a chance after they didn't win a series for a month and a half, I was talking about the future and whether they were going to renew the lease at PNC Park in 12 years. I was looking way down the line, and I had fear for baseball in Pittsburgh because of how poor the attendance was and how much people had just checked out. And I don't know if this healed it all the way. They're going to have to make a serious run at the playoffs, I think.
I agree.
Maybe Corey Dickerson could be re-signed because when you trade Meadows in the outfield, now you have Polanco, you have Marte, both playing well, but you need that third guy. So maybe that's Dickerson, who's been a fine pickup from Tampa Bay. Again, suddenly it's the Tampa to Pittsburgh pipeline that's
stealing them all.
Working out, bearing fruit. He's Mark. He's my younger brother. I'm Matt. We're talking sports. We're about to talk more of Mark's expertise on the next segment here on Geiks Got Game. It's multiple Geiks. So put a little apostrophe after the S, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. We're going to get into PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs, coming up next. Should they all be legalized? Just legalize the whole thing? That may sound ridiculous on the surface, but I think both of us, especially Mark's going to try to make a case that this might be the more fair and equitable way to run a sports league or to run sport generally speaking. So we'll try to change your mind coming up after this break on the River's Edge.
Hey, it's Mike Sasson. Guess what? You used to love us at 10. You're going to love us even more at 9. It's me. It's Alex. It's funniness. It's guests. It's all sorts of me yelling into microphones only 1 hour earlier. It's exactly what you need at 9 o'clock. It's like a shot of adrenaline. It's the Mike Sasson Show, now starting at 9 o'clock on Tuesday on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio.
Happy August 2018, first show of the new month. for us here at Geiks Got Game. Brian Crawford's producing on this Thursday afternoon. Happy hour has arrived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm Matt Geika. My brother Mark is next to me. Who else would you rather be with? It feels like we're even at a bar, doesn't it? We're sitting on a little high top going on here, high top action. So we're drinking Oscar Blues.
Free beer.
What do you have? You have the Dale's Pale Ale.
DPA for those that are in the game.
TPA, yeah, right. Mark's more of a connoisseur than me.
Game.
And I have the Mama's Little Yellow Pills.
Or Mama's if you're in the game.
Yeah, right. Well, if you're in the game, what do you call what Brian has over there? The pinner?
Just pinner.
Just pinner. Pinner, I guess, is catchy enough.
So there's like no game?
Is
that what you're saying?
I mean, there's a game. It's just not as big of a game over here.
Okay.
Wow. I don't even know what we're talking about.
But it's just all made up, really.
Yeah, we're having a few drinks. We're kicking back. We're talking sports and things adjacent to sports. The first segment was all about the Pirates. I did not expect that. I thought they'd do nothing at the trade deadline. Instead, they did the thing at the deadline, as it turned out. And personally, I'm thrilled because the Pittsburgh sports scene is more interesting when the Pirates are doing things like this, when they're making noise. It can be a long summer when they're not. We've seen that way too many times.
Oh, boy.
The last 2 summers have been pretty depressing in that way, falling off from the heights of 2013, 2014, and 2015. Yeah, they broke the streak, but they never really got that strong foothold. And maybe it was a mistake in management thinking they could just keep that competitive window open forever and ever, or for at least a long time. As it turns out, maybe that's harder to do now.
Yep.
Well, you have teams like the Cubs, you have teams like the Astros who are willing to just blow it up and then build up, and we saw both of them win World Series in back-to-back years, whereas the Pirates were trying to just maintain and then maybe have a little bump where they are a little bit better than they were the previous season. Maybe the way to compete now in baseball is go like this. Of course, it helps when you have the Cubs riches at your disposal.
Yeah, that helps.
Well, in other sports, yeah, sports like the NHL, where when you tank and then you build up with cheap young talent, in a salary cap league, that makes a lot of sense.
Definitely.
Makes more sense because, well, when Crosby and Malkin first came in, they weren't getting paid very much at all. Now, of course, they are, but they've taken less over the years, and I spoke on this recently, too. Let's not brush that under the carpet as a reason why the Penguins have been able to have this second prime, this second surge with Crosby and Malkin, because they're getting paid $2 to $3 million less than most superstars out there, and you could say they're right there in the top 5 still in the NHL. So that's a big deal, but neither here nor there. In baseball, it was kind of a thought that maybe a small market team could have a long run, like the Cleveland Indians did of the late 90s, for instance, the Oakland A's, the Tampa Bay Rays, in fact, when Joe Madden was down there. They had 4 or 5 years, but with the rich teams becoming now smart teams as well, that has made it more difficult. Maybe you just got to go all in or close to all in, whatever that might mean to you when you do have the opportunity. So for the Pirates, I'm not sure that's exactly what they did, but they did give up young prospects in order to get better now, and it looks like they have done that. And at the very least, they're in the postseason picture, and that's a good time. Well, whenever Mark comes in, we talk about sports medicine. We talk about the scientific side of sports in some ways, right?
Sure.
Whether it be physics, whether it be medicine, whether it be whatever. One topic that you and I were discussing a little bit in recent days via text, in person, since you've come back to town here, is performance-enhancing drugs. And it's always been a subject that's fascinated me. I read into the whole Barry Bonds scenario. I got the Game of Shadows book that was put out by the 2 journalists with the San Francisco Chronicle. I forget their names right now. That escapes me. But yeah, Game of Shadows is the book. It was looking into the basically the rise of performance-enhancing drugs in baseball. I got the Jose Canseco book. Yeah, Juiced, right. So that's always been a topic that's tickled my fancy in that way. But I've never thought about it in this way before until you brought it up. We couldn't find the exact story in a medical journal,
and then I did, and I found others like it too.
Yeah, there you go. So it's maybe gaining some steam in the from the clinician side of it.
I think this one was back even 2003. I think we said
right.
That I'm referencing.
But I never heard anything about this type of an idea where you just legalize performance-enhancing drugs across the board.
Right.
Benefits, drawbacks. What do you think about that theory?
So I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. This isn't just a simple
Yeah, yes or no question.
Yes or no. There's you also have to look at multiple different factors from what are some of the most obvious issues. Health, probably someone's going to bring that up. Is it even safe? And
It depends on what drugs you're talking about.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, some of the ones that we're using are naturally occurring hormones or substances that are in the body already. Human growth hormone, seen naturally in the body. EPO for the endurance athlete, found naturally in the body. And then when you talk about safety of those things too, you have to bring up some people just have a natural higher level of these things than others. And if that's their competitive edge, they are just gifted by genetics, is that really competition?
Right. Is it our purview to say, well, you can't have this level of testosterone?
More naturally more gifted because of genetics than one other person. Is that fair? And if you're talking about sport and competition, you're arguing the same thing. Is it fair if this guy, if Barry Bonds was on, the type of steroids that he was on to hit home runs? Well, is it fair that, maybe someone like Albert Pujols, we don't know, it was given higher levels of testosterone or human growth hormone naturally, and that's why he was that much better than everybody else. Mm-hmm. So
it's a good question.
They're the same argument in my mind.
Well, the argument there would probably be, if I may play devil's advocate, is natural versus unnatural.
Doing, right? Sure.
Right? Because if you're given it, if that is how your body operates, then the argument that we've heard over the years is that, well, that's okay. We can't do anything about that, so we'll accept that, as opposed to bringing, if you're below, up to this level, or if you're already there, like Barry Bonds was already a very talented baseball player, maybe one of the best of all time before he even took anything, and then he went from there to here, 73 homers, 500 on base percentage, video game numbers. So, but it is on a sliding scale, and it's all relative, right?
I mean, I still argue that if you're given it naturally, how is that still a fair advantage?
Well, I guess it's not fair in the purest sense of the word, right?
Well, and then even, again, bringing this back just because I mentioned safety, people who have higher levels of EPO, naturally when we're talking about endurance, I'm switching sports. So
that allows...
Follow the train of thought here.
EPO is blood doping. It allows the red blood cell to retain more oxygen, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, it's like the delivery system. Mm-hmm. So it can get oxygen to the working muscles. And so some people have higher levels of it already naturally. And those people are at a higher chance of having a stroke in the first place than people who, if you raise it artificially. Okay. So the risk is still the same within that type of drug and that type of situation. So people who have those higher levels, their blood cells are potentially going to be more sticky, or because there's more of that type of the blood cell count, that they're going to conglomerate easier and cause a stroke. And so if your stroke risk, if you're talking about health again, it is the same if you have it naturally or artificially. What's the difference? You're still at the same risk.
Yeah, so if you're talking just risk, if that is
this is just safety, if this is your argument of safety.
If that's your drawback on this, that you don't want to put someone into a danger zone for stroke, for a heart attack,
or other type of, they were just looking at stroke risk.
Or just injuries. Say, we've heard the argument that steroids develop muscles to the point that the connective tissue, the ligaments, the bones even, can't handle the strain. What's your feeling on that?
I don't really know a ton of. I can't speak on the actual research, I think, on that. So, not to misspeak, but my thought is if you're still loading the tissue slow enough and safe enough, then if it's legal, then you're going to watch those things a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if you're loading quicker and because you have this capacity to create more strength and you're building too fast, and then the ligaments and the bone don't have enough time to really take on that stress, then it becomes more of an unsafe issue. And then what we know about different types of steroids and their effects on tendons is it potentially weakens them, like injections when people have pain, the corticosteroid injections, it weakens tendons and bone. And same thing with the oral type. So, if it's done in a safer way, a way that can be monitored, which is why I say, why not? If someone's going to be doing this illegal, we should have some form of, it's going to be less safe because they're trying to sneak around a system. So if you create a system where it's legalized, now we can look at, okay, how can we do this more safely? How can we stage this? Can we identify people who are at risk if we do give them certain drugs? Can we do those type of things to make sure that it is a safe move? So in terms of safety, that's kind of the idea behind that the more that you keep it illegal, the longer that you're going to make it unsafe for people who are going to use it regardless, because they're going to. It's out there. People are doing it in all sports, so that's my issue with.
Well, that's a very good argument. That's an angle that I hadn't considered. It's a similar angle to, well, legalize marijuana because that'll eliminate the black market, and then you can regulate it as a government. You can put resources into it. Well, you can make the quality better. You can make it all more legitimate. And we've seen various states across the great union of ours benefit from that in different ways, whether it be recreational or just medical.
Yep.
And I think we're trending that way in embracing more of these substances. I mean, there was an amendment that prohibited us from doing this, drinking this in public. This would have been illegal 80 years ago. And it's not like just because there's a law right now that is absolutely the right thing, or it's not like because we feared using steroids in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s that we should fear it now. And I say steroids, PEDs in general, just any kind of performance-enhancing drug. Right. The argument that has the most weight for me, though, or a lot of weight for me, it makes me really consider it, is that, like you said, the way we have it right now where certain things are outlawed, it causes people to go around the system. And let's be honest, people are getting away with things right now.
Yeah.
It just, logically speaking, they have to be. But if everything is legal, then there is no cheating.
Right.
Right? Just use that as a logical problem.
Mm-hmm. But then, I mean, we allow modifications of all kinds of other things, right? You allow people to use other natural substances, protein loading. What's the difference between loading protein versus, I mean, obviously there is a much lower risk but there's still, you can consume too much of some types of dietary things in your diet, that we see that become dangerous. So, I mean, again, I think if you legalize these things, then you can have the appropriate testing measures and safety measures put out there that make it so the risk is really low. Mm-hmm. And if they know that going in, like what we're doing right now with alcohol too, right? That's another drug that is essentially more harmful than some of these things that we're even talking about these people are doing.
Right, we're talking about getting better at
we're okay
athletics,
with
we're allowed to compromise our motor skills and
your health and long.
Yeah, right. If you drink enough of it, there's varying research as to different levels of alcohol, and at some level it might be a benefit. At some level, you go past that, and it's a detriment to your long-term health. Sure. So, I just want to put all these substances on an equal playing field, and there's such a stigma attached to certain drugs like marijuana,
sure.
And the stigma is gradually dissipating there. Maybe it's just the baby boomers who first experienced it getting older and in positions of leadership. Maybe it's our generation making it more of a standard or more of a normal thing to do. Much like we saw with alcohol back in the 20s and 30s. And perhaps we'll see the same thing carry over to the world of sports. And the concern would be that certain people just wouldn't be able to compete anymore, right? With this. Or that could be a concern.
It could be now you're allowing the people who are seemingly riding the bench to have some form of advantage to now break past.
Yeah, right.
We don't know. I mean, there's such a thing as the tipping point, right? Where maybe they're off by a certain amount of seconds or strength-wise that they can produce, and then all of a sudden you turn someone who's riding the bench to an all-star. Mm-hmm. I mean that is sure that is a concept in this world, is that tipping point, and we don't know where the line is for certain people, where the potential shoots out of the roof and where it still stays status quo and low. So I mean, who knows? I'm sure that happened many times in the wild, wild west days of MLB when testing was non-existent. Sure. In the late 90s, early 2000s, I'm sure there were plenty of players who wouldn't have made it under normal circumstances, but were able to do so because they took advantage of lax rules in that way in Major League Baseball. So I'm sure it happened. NHL testing didn't catch up to the modern standard until after the first lockout, or the full season lockout, I should say, in 2005. Before that, who knows how many guys were doing something that was outside of the legal bounds in the United States of America. So, well, how much of it legally, like certain steroids are illegal to administer in certain ways. So we almost have to get past that, right, in order to get to the point where we want to. Yeah, I don't know what schedule of a medication it's considered with some of those things. But, I mean, marijuana is considered a Schedule I drug, which is absolutely ridiculous. But that's a whole other topic. Yeah, right. We could probably spend a lot more time on that. But you brought up another good point about the testing. And it's always going to be behind where the cover-up is for these athletes to, they know when testing's happening. They know how to get around the tests and what the tests are testing for and how to get that out of their blood or urine or whatever. So why do we keep spending all the money, and they spend a lot of money. It's wasteful money because it's not even really going to catch that many people anyway. So if they need to know, the part of in the article too, it was like, they're so good at it that as long as they know ahead of time, like there's no way. Like these people that get caught obviously just skip doing something that they should have done. It's not like they had like a surprise test. They just did something stupid. They just didn't follow the right protocol or whatever.
There are random tests, don't get me wrong, but for the most part you know what time of the year, generally speaking, when to cycle on or cycle off, right. One would imagine. But you eliminate all of that if you just say, okay, do whatever. And what I like about this, I'm glad you brought this up, is that it would allow legitimate research money to go into this and efforts to go into how can we do this safely and reach the limits, reach the potential of human performance. That's what it's about for me. That's why I go to the gym. That's why I work out. That's why I exercise, is to reach my potential. Well, maybe there's a little bit more that I could get to within the frameworks of human limitation. Maybe there's a little bit more that I could get to with a little bit of help from science. So
and maybe some of that research,
why hold back?
And maybe some of that research leaks over to the normal population too, and now we're making older people stronger. They're not falling as much, which is
right. What's wrong with that?
Associated with higher morbidity or mortality. So, I mean, these people, this type of research could leak over into the general population, and we could find safe ways to use this type of stuff for people getting better. Rehab situations, things like that, as long as it's found to be safe.
Well, you know where we stand. We're more on the laissez-faire side, the legalize it side of it.
It's just a discussion.
Where do you stand? Let us know. Social media, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on there, Matt Gajtka, MattGajtka. If you're watching right now, you can see that crazy Polish last name staring you in the face. Mark's there as well. What are you? MA_Gaj on Twitter.
Magaj.
Yeah, and I'm Matt Gajtka Media on Facebook, but you knew that if you are watching currently. Thank you for watching and listening. We're back for one more segment here on Gike's Got Game. We're going to put a bow on this thing. Talk about personal brands in sports. LeBron James changed teams again. Doesn't seem like it really matters anymore. It's amazing how far we've come in 8 years. We'll get into that and implications across the sporting world in just a moment.
Dun dun da 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 dun dun da 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 da. It's 2017. We've cleaned shit up here in Pittsburgh. Something that the governor has done that is just, it's got me giddy. I want money from Hempfield. That's what I want. Give us your cash. But why would you put trees up in front of a restaurant that views the river? If I'm going to a river-viewing restaurant, I want to actually view the river. Am I crazy?
Catch River Talk with Brian Crawford, Mondays at 10 a.m. here on the River's Edge.
This is the real shit, folks.
Hello, friends. Happy Thursday afternoon. We are enjoying our time together. I say we because my brother Mark is with me. This is Matt Gajtka. This is my show, Gike's Got Game. Thank you for that. Mark's giving me a nice back rub here in studio. Brian Crawford is alongside. We're all getting along great. I think the booze helps. Thanks again to our friends at Oscar Blues for that. We'll give a shout to your buddy Boom Madison.
Boom Madison.
What does he do for Oscar Blues? He works out west. He is a sales rep.
Yeah, for them in the LA market.
So trying to get Oscar Blues into varying bars and restaurants. I know he used to fly out to Colorado quite a bit.
Yep, still kind of does. And they buy a lot of other breweries now and distribute and that type of thing. So
yeah,
they're a bigger entity than just a brewery.
Shout out to Michael Krepp, your future brother-in-law, who has joined in. He says, thanks for the sports talk on my ride home from work.
Oh, you got it.
How about that? Don't look at the cell phone too much, though. Distracted driving is dangerous, Michael, as we all know.
Put down the phone.
We gave you a shout earlier. I hope you caught it because it was your package of 4 tickets that we were enjoying on Tuesday night in the lower bowl at PNC Park for an exciting
smooth seats
baseball game there. Mark,
I'm right next to the cow.
We did, yeah. The Chick-fil-A cow showed
right
up,
behind
and well, that was quite thrilling. That's the closest I've been to the Chick-fil-A cow.
The weirdest posture of all time on a cow.
Great posture. That thing was sitting straight up.
That's a little too stiff.
Yeah, they put some sort of an ironing board in the back there to achieve that straight line.
Big 2x4 in the back.
Neither here nor there. In the sport of baseball, I wanted to talk about individual brands in sports to close this thing out because LeBron James is on the move again. For the second time, he has left Cleveland. But as we'll get to in a bit, he hasn't abandoned Northeast Ohio
It
completely.
didn't seem so salty this time.
No, it was, well, it helps
like,
when you win a championship. It really helps, as it turns out.
And you go to the finals a bunch of times.
In baseball, is there one player who's bigger than the game? Is Mike Trout bigger than the sport in that way? I don't think. I've been talking, this was a subject 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Has it ever happened? Really?
Baseball is tough because you only get one chance out of 9 to hit, and it's not like, maybe the closest you can come is like some dominant starting pitcher because you start the action and you have an outsized impact on the outcome of one game, but it's just one game out of 5. It's not like you can just roll it over and come back and throw 6 innings the next day and 7 the next and 8 the next. It's just tough. 1 out of 5. So yeah, it's really difficult. The way the game is structured is not built for the individual player.
To pick one, I think Derek Jeter was pretty close. He was like
helps to be in New York.
Yeah, I mean he was a face for a long time though of
helps to be handsome.
Yeah, right.
Helps to win how many championships did he got 3 in a row and then 1 more, so 4.
But that's the one that I would say is probably the one that sticks out in my brain more than any other baseball player, even in the more recent history.
I think Trout, if Mike Trout could just go to the playoffs a little bit more, but again, it's the sport where one player has the least influence on what they're doing. So it's not like he can will the Angels to the playoffs like you could see a LeBron James will the Cavaliers to the
it's definitely
NBA
not like
Finals.
Basketball.
Yeah, basketball is the opposite.
Sure.
Basketball is the very opposite of the spectrum here. If we're talking individual influence, you have basketball on the big end and baseball on the short end.
Of course, we're removing all the individual sports.
Right, exactly. Well,
because that's
obviously. Yeah.
Well, just
one
for
man,
the viewers
one
at home.
woman teams there. Yeah. Right. So you have baseball here where the player isn't as big as the game, not even close. I think hockey's probably next. Maybe soccer's in there too because they're very much team-oriented sports.
Yeah.
Football,
you can kind of force feed a ball or puck to that person.
You can, but well, in soccer, yeah, you're on the field for 90 minutes. In hockey, you're only on the field for 1/3 of the game for the most part, maybe a half.
Still, sometimes with defensemen, they're logging,
or a goalie who's really, really good.
That too.
Yeah, so
they're the whole time.
Positions matter there. Positions matter in football. If you're a quarterback, you can
football.
Control the action. Running back to a degree.
I would say they have a handful of people that are bigger than the game.
Mm-hmm. Quarterbacks mostly.
That's running backs, even wide receivers.
Wide receivers
now,
sometimes. Mm-hmm.
Especially with how big, that type of the game is developing.
But at least in basketball, individual players can transcend the team. And it was only 8 years ago when LeBron James was treated like Benedict Arnold in Cleveland. It was nasty.
I know.
It was, there were some racial overtones in that too. Let's not leave that out. There was some slave master slave feeling about how Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cavaliers, was talking when LeBron left. But things got better, and I wonder if it's just culturally we become a little more sympathetic toward the individual. Maybe we feel like in our workaday lives, our companies don't support us like they once do. Maybe I feel like no one's loyal to me, so why should I be loyal to you necessarily? Not to be so brazen about it, but in a certain way, you have to look out for yourself first and foremost. So maybe that's part of it as well. There aren't as many benefits. No one works for a company for 20, 30, 40 years.
Not anymore.
At our age, we're not going to work like that.
No.
You just went
There's no benefit either. I mean,
no, there really isn't because they could drop you at a moment's notice.
And I've read recently too on looking at research, the way that people make more money or feel or get valued is they leave companies and they get a new job which pays higher. Like no one gets raises.
It's the power of free agency,
right?
And it's come to our lives.
Wow, really.
We had a preview of sports with baseball in the 70s, and then it came to the other sports as well. But with someone like LeBron, maybe a Stephen Curry, it wouldn't matter who he played for. It wouldn't matter who Kevin Durant played for. They were going.
It doesn't anymore.
They are their own entities, and maybe I'm just biased because I feel this way, but it's like I don't even care who LeBron James plays for because I don't have a team in the NBA that I pull for consistently.
That's probably, me too.
So if you're more of a casual, perhaps that biases you too. But the way I feel is LeBron can play for anyone, and there's no stigma attached to moving around from team to team anymore.
And then the thing that we talked about too was they have literally their own sub-brands from these companies, Nike and Under Armour and Adidas, and they have their own logos, they have their own shoes, and we talked about the Michael Jordan effect, from how that's now its own brand.
Jordan was the first.
Nike.
Jordan was the one who started it, right?
Yeah.
We can agree on that.
Definitely.
Or in a team aspect, in a team sport.
And marketing and getting a brand and having that evolve into something. I mean, it's now there's teams that have just Jordan jerseys, sponsored by that. We talked about that the other day.
Yeah, we did. It was it was quite the thing when you saw the Jordan logo, and I think it was University of Cincinnati were one of the early adopters for that.
They were.
Now North Carolina, of course, Michael's alma mater.
Yep.
They've picked up on that too. And an
They
individual.
always said football too. Now it's starting to leak.
Tom
over into
Brady,
sports.
TB12 has his own thing.
We'll talk about Jordan going to Michigan.
Oh, you mean Jordan
Yeah,
brand
Jordan
specifically?
Michigan's.
Okay, yeah,
Anyway.
right. But you see, this is the way it's going, I think. And I believe the more popular sports, this is also why I think basketball has gained a greater cultural currency for young people, is we feel like we have to look out for ourselves. And we associate, we sympathize, we empathize with the athletes who move around. And like you said, you don't get raises anymore in today's corporate world.
Low value.
Yeah, you have to threaten to move.
To create your own value.
Really, I've experienced this myself. I've left places where I felt underappreciated. I think many of us have, or most of us have at this point, if you have a few years in
I've
the
been
working
immune to
world.
it because of what I chose to do with the
Yeah.
travel world.
Right. You're a
I
traveling physical therapist.
very
for those
much
who don't know.
people see the value because every time you leave, they're like, "Oh, throwing a party," and "Oh, don't leave. You should stay longer." I mean, then you really see where your value is, and it is. I mean, it's a nice feeling. Obviously, we like to get a little pat on the back every once in a while to be like, "Yeah, I mean, man, you're doing a good job," and like, "Yeah, I know."
It helps.
Yeah, it certainly does.
We're all human, right? And we can all act like Mr. Tough Guy or Tough Girl, but
Why do that?
But in the end,
Show your
these
human flaws,
emotional
people.
things can boost us a little bit more. And what you experience, what a lot of people don't get to experience, is the appreciation from people. Maybe most people don't or haven't in the past received that sort of an outpouring of emotion until they retired.
That's really
Yeah.
where that's the only reason why we see it is because it's nice. Obviously, when you leave, then people say these nice things about you because they're like, "Oh, are we ever going to see this person again?" Right? And I've gotten to witness that, fortunately, with what I do. And but it makes me sad at the same time because like you wouldn't do this for someone who's been here for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it's
you're doing it
weird.
for me that I just came in for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, Mr. Fly By Night here. He's
Are you kidding? Like that to me, that's just
mercenary.
super sad.
it
Respect
is.
people around you, guys.
It's the downside of human nature, right? Novelty. People come in and come out, and that's what we notice. We notice change. We don't notice consistency necessarily. People get sick of consistency, even in sports. I was guilty of it when Roger Federer was winning every tournament. I didn't want to root for him. I didn't want him to win. I got tired of it. Now, it's perverse, but at the back end of his career, now I'm a Roger Federer fan. It's stupid.
Stupid.
The follies of youth also.
Yeah, that was weird.
I'm getting a little bit older too. You get a little more mature. I think you start to understand. Okay, this is a better viewpoint to have, and a viewpoint of appreciation. Also, I'm 33, and I don't feel quite as spry as I did at 23. So I appreciate what Roger is
You don't?
doing at that age.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I do feel a little better in some ways.
I don't know.
Tiger Woods at 42. We're going to go out and watch him play at Bridgestone, the Bridgestone Invitational in Akron on Sunday. That is interesting as well. If we may take a little detour here before we sign off, we've seen the appreciation, the wonder, the godlike worship of Tiger Woods in some ways from the early portions of his career.
Yes.
Now there's nostalgia for people like us and some people a little bit older who grew up with him. And now there's also younger people appreciating that for the first time. That's why I think golf is great, because you can hang around for so long and you can impact different generations. Whereas, say, a Sidney Crosby, we're going to have to be telling our kids about him because he's not going to, well, presumably he's not going to play until he's 45. Maybe he will, but by the time he gets to that stage.
Prove us wrong, Sid.
Right. But someone like Tiger, he can span a couple of generations.
Yeah.
That's
still
cool.
be competitive.
That's cool for me. Just because of the way the sport is, you can still stay at or near the top and into your mid to late 40s. Who knows? Maybe even into your 50s.
Yeah, I mean, and especially now with golf is how much these guys actually work out for it. You don't see a lot of these dudes who look like you could just see them on a random course on a weekend. I mean, a lot of these guys are actually getting fit for golf. And so they're able to play longer, presumably, because they're in better shape, they can swing, so.
You know who started that trend was Mr. Woods.
Mr. Woods.
Well, he was one of the first.
He was there.
Yeah, he and I
Definitely.
remember David Duval was talking about working out and
Mental game. He was big with the focus and the Buddhist practices, right? Any of all Zen type things, and
Well, and now
he was great.
you see guys like Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka. These are monsters. Even a Jason Day or Rory McIlroy too. He transformed his body. Look back at his early days. When he was first out on tour, and now, well, you can tell he's put in some time in the gym, and he has maybe failed to access all that potential, but he's still in his late 20s. So
he's still hitting monsters.
He transformed, and I like his. I think I like his swing aesthetically the best on the PGA Tour. I like
his lurch walk up to the green,
the bouncing walk. We'll get to see that.
I have it down to a T.
If only we had a wider screen here, we could.
I'd do it right now, guys. I'd do it right now.
Here's a comment from a friend we'll see at the
Mr. Bean.
upcoming Geica Crep nuptials. Roger Bean says, it's amazing to think, and almost counter to the general norm, that athletes are willing to leave literal millions on the table just to go to a team for a chance to win. And I think he's talking, well, probably about Kevin Durant in one way, going to the Warriors where he could max out somewhere else. Well, especially in terms of length of contract.
The Heat, too, whenever you had, Wade and Bosch and LBJ all going down there.
Right, so they all made sacrifices in that way. Well, I think once you get past a certain amount of money, you realize, okay, I don't have to max out anymore. And what really makes me feel validated as a person would be to succeed as a team in this way and to have that championship. And again, as we talk about in basketball, the championships are more closely ascribed to the individual. You talk about Jordan and his 6 championships more than you talk about the Bulls and their 6 championships, because you do have that bigger influence than in other sports. So basketball is a really interesting study in changing societal norms in that way. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. And it may not go all the way across all sports, but I feel like we're creeping that way as a society, more toward the individual. Is it good or bad? I don't know. I'm not sure.
To be determined.
I still like to play team sports, but I've always been more of an individually focused person, looking more inward than outward. I think you're probably the same way. Or are you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you like a team atmosphere?
I like having the impact on a team.
Okay.
That to me was always more appreciable than
you feel
being the individual.
Lifting a team, that makes
to
you
me
feel good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gave me the feels.
I feel the same way too, whether it's playing pickup hockey or whatever. But I like the accountability of individual games, is what I'm saying.
I enjoy
in
both.
That way.
You know me, I play everything.
Maybe we'll play a little bit more soccer before you get out of town.
Let's do it.
Or some hockey. I guess we'll see. We're all
Let's play a pickup game.
We're all about participating, not necessarily spectating in that way. Well, thanks again for watching on this Thursday afternoon. I wish it was Friday. What day is it? The beer's doing its job. And thanks for listening, whether it be live on the stream on riversedgepgh.com or on the podcast. For Brian Crawford, engineering the show, coming in at a wonky hour for Mark Geica. I'm Matt, reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. Talk to you next week. Same time, same place on the River's Edge.